Have you ever wondered what happens when your online work friends, the ones you only know from a screen, become your real-life colleagues? We're going to dive into a fascinating study that unpacks that exact moment, that powerful and often really emotional transformation when digital DMs turn into actual handshakes. And, as you'll see, it matters a whole lot more than you might think.
You know, so many of us have these digital colleagues we've never actually met. We share ideas, we solve problems, we build a real connection through screen. But what's the real impact when those online chats turn into a shared coffee in the real world? Well, this explainer is zooming in on that very question, all through the lens of the super important field of education. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about the rise of these online professional communities. Then, we'll dive deep into a really unique event in Spain called the #EduJornada. We'll look at how it was studied, what the surprising findings were, and finally, what this all means for the future of how we work and connect. All right, first things first, let's set the scene. The whole idea of a workplace is changing, right? For a lot of teachers today, their most supportive colleagues aren't just down the hall. They could be hundreds of miles away, connected only by a screen. You know, teaching can sometimes be a pretty isolating job, but digital platforms like X, formerly Twitter, have created something amazing, what some people call a virtual faculty lounge. It's the space where you can share lesson plans, ask for advice, and just connect with other people who totally get it. It really breaks down the four walls of the classroom. And this quote from the study just nails it. That line between our online work life and our offline one, it's getting fuzzier and fuzzier. And this study zooms in on a moment where that line pretty much disappears completely. A real-life meetup that was born from one of these awesome digital communities. So, how does this all actually play out in the real world? Well, for that, let's head over to Spain and take a closer look at a really cool event called the #EduJornada. So, what exactly is the #EduJornada? Well, think of it less like a stuffy formal conference and more like a massive friendly meetup. It actually grew out of popular Spanish educator hashtags, especially one called #ClaustroVirtual, which literally means virtual faculty lounge. It's an event that was designed by teachers for teachers who are already friends and colleagues online. And let me tell you, this is not your typical professional development day, and this slide shows you why. First off, it's free. That removes a huge barrier right there. It also intentionally mixes the serious learning stuff with social time, like lunches and dinners. The topics, they're actually picked by the people attending. And they use a live social media back channel, so the conversation is happening online at the same time it's happening in the room. Okay, so how do the researchers get inside the heads of everyone who went to this thing? Their method was really smart. It was a mix of asking direct questions and just observing what was happening publicly, kind of like digital detective work. They used a three-part approach. First, a detailed survey went out to attendees that used rating scales to measure feelings and open-ended questions to get personal stories. But, and this is key, they also gathered up all the public tweets that use the event's hashtag. That way, they could see what people were sharing in the heat of the moment. And they got a really solid response. 156 educators filled out that survey. Now, that's a 57% response rate, which, trust me, is fantastic. It gives us a really reliable snapshot of what the attendees were actually experiencing. But they didn't stop there. On top of the surveys, they analyzed nearly 1,200 tweets. This let them compare what people were saying privately in the survey to what they were sharing publicly online, giving them this incredibly rich, deep understanding of the event's real impact. All right, we've seen the setup, we've seen the method. Now for the really exciting part. What did all this data actually show us? The results are not just interesting. Honestly, they're genuinely heartwarming and have some pretty huge implications. Just take a look at these numbers, because this is where it gets so fascinating. I mean, sure, learning practical classroom tips was rated highly, a 4.29 out of 5, that's great, but look at the top two. The highest rated parts of the experience were reflecting on their profession and hearing other points of view, and right behind it, the simple act of meeting online colleagues in person. The big takeaway here? Connection wasn't just a side benefit. It was a huge reason people were there. This quote just gets right to the heart of those numbers, doesn't it? People didn't just feel like they were at a conference. They felt like they were coming home to their community, to their tribe. And that feeling of belonging was a massive part of the whole experience. I love this one. It perfectly captures the whole point of the event. It wasn't about replacing the online world, but about giving it a physical home. It's that moment where avatars and usernames become real people, with real handshakes and real laughs. And this tweet, which was pulled right from the research, says it all. I mean, just look at those words: closeness, warmth, laughs, emotion. Yeah, learning is in there, but it's wrapped up in this much bigger, much more human experience. This was clearly about getting emotionally and professionally recharged. And that brings us to the single biggest takeaway from the whole study. For these teachers, the value of meeting up was just as much about feeling seen, supported, and energized as it was about learning new teaching strategies. The social and the professional weren't two separate things. They were completely connected. Okay, so let's zoom out. What does this one event in Spain tell us about the future of professional life? Why is this finding so critical? Let's unpack the really powerful implications here. This slide does a great job of breaking it down. The online community is incredible for that day-to-day support, for sharing resources, for fighting that daily isolation. But what this study proves is that the in-person meetup does something different, something deeper. It creates those emotional connections. It reminds you why you do what you do. And it builds this real, tangible sense of belonging that's just tough to replicate through a screen. So here's the bottom line, why this matters for all of us, not just teachers. It proves that real professional growth isn't just about information. It's about emotion. It's about well-being. And get this, these face-to-face meetings can actually fight burnout by reminding people of their purpose. These moments of connection build the resilience we all need to thrive at work, not just survive. And that leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. As our lives get more and more digital, this study is a powerful reminder of that unique, irreplaceable energy that only comes from being in the same room together. It really makes you wonder, in our rush for digital efficiency, what essential human experiences might we be losing along the way?